Good morning, friends. This is Michaela at Heartscapes out here in the garden this morning. You can probably hear my chickens clacking up back there in the background. And I've been wanting to come on here and share something that's been on my heart for a few days now. But often I feel that inspiration like first thing in the morning when I haven't showered and dealing with the kids. And by the time I feel like presentable and ready, the busyness of the day catches up and I just don't get to it. I don't know if y'all have that experience of like wanting to put yourself completely together before you like make a video and go on social media. Um, but the truth is the inspiration comes in the morning when I'm sitting with my coffee and just in this garden. And so I decided to just go ahead and turn this on, even though I'm still in my sweatshirts. Um, but the thing that often gets me so inspired first thing in the morning as I'm having those, slow moments with my coffee is a practice that I'm in that helps me kind of set the tone for my day and kind of helps to steer what I'm paying attention to. It kind of helps to uh, influence my intuition on what to pay attention to. And that practice is simply that I ask myself, what are you navigating today? What is it that I'm making my way through? And I let that be a really open-ended question. Sometimes it's really literal things like I'm navigating having to, finish up a newsletter article or go on errands or whatever. But more often it's something a little surprising, something I hadn't necessarily consciously thought about. And what came to me the other day that I really wanted to share is that on that particular day, I was sitting out here and it had just started raining the couple of days before. But the sky was clear on that morning. And so there's that particular wonderful sparkly quality to the air. And what I was navigating was beauty. I became aware that day I was navigating beauty, and I was navigating paying attention to the way that beauty operates in our life and the role that it has on both, kind of mystical, but also very pragmatic levels. In particular, I was reflecting on the role that beauty plays in building our resilience and building our capacity to be with difficult things, and the way that it influences both our physiology and our ability to pay attention, because we move in the direction of what we find beautiful. Similar to gratitude, to feeling a genuine experience of gratitude, when we behold something beautiful, or engage it with any of our senses, because of course we can perceive beauty with any of our senses, it actually has a physiological effect on us, similar to gratitude, that releases endorphins in the brain that increase our sense of connection, our sense of compassion, our capacity to relate to other people, and our sense of expansiveness. Our sense of possibility widens when we perceive beauty. And perhaps you can imagine or think of moments in your life where that was so, and you can really reflect on the impact and the value of that in navigating difficult times and building our resilience. Because what happens when we're experiencing difficulty is that our world really contracts. It contracts down to the problem that's in front of us and the feelings surrounding that problem. Most likely fear, perhaps anger, perhaps frustration, perhaps sadness. Our world contracts when we're really caught up in a problem and the feelings surrounding it. And in those moments, if we can have the presence of mind to pause and to seek something that we perceive as beautiful and just rest our attention there for a little while, it actually shifts our relationship with that challenge in that moment, possibly just for that moment. But what a difference it makes when in any given moment we gain the capacity to take a wider view, to understand the next right thing to do, to make a good decision, to make any decision. I know for me, in the past, before I started really working on my capacity to deal with difficulty, what would happen for me when I was in those moments is I would just freeze up I would lose the capacity to make a decision. And it would seem that I was being very calm and collected inside of a difficult situation. But really I was just frozen. I was just stuck. And many things have helped me to shift that dynamic. But the practice of being with beauty has definitely been one of them. And I wanted to just share a story of an example of that and really encourage you to think about moments when this might have been true for you. And then I'll invite you into a practice. But this particular moment happened about 6 years ago. And at the time, I have 2 daughters. One is now 22, one is 10. And at the time, the older daughter, she was going through a rough time. She's, a teenager, and things were kind of challenging. And she and I were going through a rough patch together. She was making some decisions that were not particularly safe. And, if any of y'all have parented or been a lover of somebody who loves a teenager at any time, you know how these things can go. And on this particular night, she'd been out with friends and she had a curfew to be home by 11. And I fell asleep before then. And when I woke up around 3 a.m. or so, I immediately just had that sense, that like parent's premonition, that my child was not in the house. And sure enough, she was not. And so I went into that panicked place. Because, quite easily, because during this time of difficulty, I was actually living in a lot of fear pretty chronically. It was like this constant, undercurrent of fear and worry that was with me all the time. And so it didn't take much to kind of flare it up. And so it flared up, and I called a friend to come stay with my other daughter. Luckily she answered the phone at 3 a.m. And went out, drove out into the night looking for my daughter, which was kind of a foolish thing to do, to drive randomly around town looking for a teenager who doesn't want to be found in the middle of the night. But it was all I could think of to do, was that automatic response. And I drove around for a while, and of course I didn't find her, and that sense of fear, rose into panic, and of course I'm texting her 1,000 times. She's not answering. And so at a certain point, I just pulled the car over. I was in downtown, and I just sat in the car and cried and was frustrated and scared and didn't know what to do. But all of a sudden, I kind of became aware of my surroundings. And it was a night similar to the moment when I, recalled this memory, which was that it had been raining for a while. But that night, the night was clear. So there was that sparkly quality to everything, that fresh wetness of a new rain, but then this clear night sky with this just amazing blaze of stars, everywhere. And I just sat for a moment and looked into that sky and was able to perceive its beauty. I was able to perceive its vastness, its openness. And it was like several things happened all at once. First of all, my sense of panic just melted away. Those endorphins got released in my brain, and I felt this sense of connection. And I felt this sense of expansiveness, literally looking out into this vast night sky with all of these, thousands of little suns, burning in that night sky that we call stars. And the sense of relief, first of all, was incredible. That sense of possibility opening up. And then a sense of clarity to know the next right thing to do. In that case, the next right thing to do was to go home, because I wasn't going to find her this way. She didn't want to be found. And I needed to go home and be with my other child. And sure enough, about 10 minutes after I got home, she walked through the door and was very sorry for stressing me out. She needed to go on a walk. I get it. She probably needed to look at those stars too. And I've told this story a number of times, and I usually focus on a part in the story where I called another friend and we talked about gratitude and engaged gratitude as a practice for um, for softening the panic. But that happened after that moment with the night sky. And I didn't remember that moment until the other day when I was sitting here, just having my coffee and asked myself, what am I navigating? And it was beauty. And so it really struck me that, something that I often teach to in my Reiki classes and in other spaces, that it's often the simplest practices, simple practices that engage our body, our mind, our voice, our heart, practiced over time consistently, that can have the most profound effect on how we're experiencing a given situation in our life. That can dramatically change how we're perceiving something from, perhaps awful and dire to maybe something where there's a little bit more possibility, or even just flipping something from feeling bad to feeling interesting or neutral, or maybe even good. Or just to soften the duality between, is this a good situation, is it a bad situation, and allow us to just be in it for what it is and understand what our role inside of that situation is and what we need to be okay and to make good decisions. And so focusing our attention on beauty is one of those things. And so I invite you into this practice. And like any of these things, any of the practices within the system of Reiki, any practices of meditation, any kind of physical practices that build up our bodies, we need to be working with them in moments, consistently in moments when we're more or less okay, in order to have them available to us when we're not okay. That night I wasn't in a practice of dwelling on beauty. It just so happened that I fell into that practice at that night. But ever since then, I have made it a practice to, from time to time, just pause in my day, just take a few breaths, look around my surroundings or feel my surroundings, listen with my ear, and perceive something beautiful. And the amazing thing is that not only is this incredibly simple, but it's incredibly accessible, because I found that there's always beauty to be found, no matter where we are, even in the most bleak places. I've been able to rest my attention on beauty in, on the curve of a freeway overpass, that line just striking me as beautiful. My own hands can be something to rest on, and just appreciating the unique shape of a hand. There's often something in the air that sounds beautiful. So I'd like to invite you into this practice, perhaps even right now, if you have a moment, just pause and just extend your senses into your environment, no matter where you are. Find something that strikes you as beautiful and just rest your attention there for a few moments. Just notice what happens to your mind, what happens to your body, what happens to your heart, and how you're feeling. And just notice the impact of being with beauty as a friend and ally, as something that's always available to us. Perhaps track that in a journal over time and make that a practice on a, somewhat regular basis, so that when you're in a moment of distress, a moment of discord, a moment of disconnection with somebody else because of something difficult that's happening, you can call on that practice to shift how you're feeling about that situation, to call on that feeling of connection and expansiveness, to see how that changes how you perceive that person that you're in conflict with, how that perceives your sense of possibility in that moment, and the decisions that you're able to make. So give that a try. Let me know how it goes, if it's something that feels valuable to you. If you have other practices that that do this for you, I'd love to know about them. And in the meantime, until we meet again, may you be provisioned for your journey home. All right. I love you. Goodbye.